My name is Margaret. I am 75 years old. And I need to tell you something that will shake you to your core. For 6 months I believed my own son was my husband. I know how that sounds. I know you might think I'm making this up. But I swear on everything sacred that this is the truth. This is my confession. This is my story. After losing my memory, I woke up in a hospital bed. A kind man was holding my hand. He had gentle eyes. He called me darling. He said he was my husband. I believed him completely. That man was my son David. For half a year I lived a lie. I trusted him. I depended on him. I felt grateful for his care. I even felt affection for this man I thought had been my life partner for decades. The worst part, he let me believe it. He encouraged it. He played along with my confusion. I remember looking at him across the breakfast table. His face seemed familiar but distant, like trying to remember a dream. I would search his features for memories that never came. I would wonder why I couldn't recall our wedding day, why I couldn't remember falling in love. But I trusted him. When your memory is gone, trust becomes everything. You have no choice but to believe the people around you. You become like a child again. Helpless. Vulnerable. I would ask him questions. Tell me about our first date. Remind me how we met. He would smile sadly and say we would talk about it later. That I needed to focus on getting better first. He was so patient. So caring. So convincing. I felt sorry for this man who claimed to be my husband. I thought he was suffering because his wife couldn't remember their life together. I wanted to be a good wife to him. I wanted to make up for my broken mind. The guilt I felt was crushing. Here was this devoted man taking care of me. And I couldn't even remember loving him. Some nights I would lie awake wondering if I had been a bad wife before. Maybe that's why my memory was blocking him out. Maybe I had done something terrible that my mind was protecting me from. I would study his face when he wasn't looking, searching for any flicker of recognition, any spark of remembered love. There was nothing. Just emptiness where our history should have been. But I played my part. I tried to be the wife he deserved. I cooked his favorite meals when he told me what they were. I listened to music he said we used to dance to. I wore the perfume he claimed I had always worn. Everything felt wrong. But I thought that was just the memory loss. I thought it would come back eventually. I was so wrong. So terribly, horribly wrong. The truth, when it finally came out, destroyed me. But before I tell you how it happened, you need to understand who I was before. You need to know about my real life. My real husband. My real family. Because only then will you understand how deep this betrayal went. Before everything changed, I was just an ordinary grandmother. I lived a simple, happy life in a small town in Ohio. I had been married to my husband Robert for 47 years. We had 2 children. David, who was 52, and Sarah, who was 49. Robert was the love of my life. We met when I was 23 and he was 25. He was working at the local bank. I was a secretary at the elementary school. He had the kindest smile and the worst jokes you ever heard. Our courtship was old-fashioned. He would pick me up every Friday night for dinner and a movie. He always brought flowers. Always opened my car door. He was a true gentleman from another era. We married after 2 years of dating. Had a small ceremony at the Methodist church. My dress was simple white cotton with pearl buttons. Robert wore his father's navy suit. We couldn't afford much, but we were rich in love. David came first. A beautiful baby boy with his father's dark hair and my green eyes. I remember holding him for the first time and feeling like my heart might burst from happiness. Robert cried when the doctor placed David in his arms. Sarah arrived 3 years later. A tiny princess with blonde curls and the sweetest giggle. Our family felt complete. 2 parents, 2 children, and more love than our little house could contain. Robert worked his way up at the bank over the years. I stayed home with the children until they were in high school. Then I went back to work part-time at the school. We lived modestly but comfortably. We took camping trips in the summers. Had family game nights on Sundays. David was always a sensitive child. He worried about everything. If I had a headache, he would bring me aspirin and a cool cloth. If Robert was late from work, David would stand at the window watching for his car. He loved his family fiercely. Sarah was our social butterfly. Always organizing neighborhood games. Always making friends. She married her high school sweetheart and moved to California after college. We missed her terribly but were proud of her independence. David never married. He lived about 20 minutes away and worked as an accountant. He visited us every Sunday for dinner. He would mow our lawn in summer and shovel our driveway in winter. He was devoted to his parents. Robert and I aged together gracefully. We celebrated our 40th anniversary with a party in our backyard. All the neighbors came. Sarah flew in from California. David gave a speech that made everyone cry. We had our health scares over the years. Robert had a minor heart attack at 68. I had my gallbladder removed at 70. But we took care of each other. We never doubted we would be together until the end. Robert loved to garden. He grew the most beautiful tomatoes in the county. I loved to read. We would spend evenings on our front porch. Him watering his plants, me with my nose in a book. Comfortable in our silence. We had our little routines. Coffee together every morning at 6. The crossword puzzle in the Sunday paper. Evening walks around the neighborhood. 47 years of small, precious moments. I thought we would have more time. I thought we would celebrate our 50th anniversary. I thought we would grow old together in our little house with the rose garden. But life had other plans. And David, our devoted son, would make choices that would haunt us all. Looking back now, I can see signs I missed. David never brought girlfriends around. He seemed lonely sometimes. He would linger after Sunday dinners like he didn't want to go home to his empty apartment. But I never imagined. Never in my worst nightmares did I think he was capable of what he did. It happened on a Tuesday morning in March. I remember that detail clearly because it was the last thing I would remember clearly for a very long time. I was making Robert's breakfast. Scrambled eggs and toast, the way he liked it every morning for 47 years. The coffee was brewing. The morning news was playing softly on the kitchen radio. Robert was upstairs getting dressed for work. Even at 74, he still went to the bank 3 days a week as a consultant. He said retirement was boring. He needed to feel useful. I was reaching for the orange juice in the refrigerator when it happened. A sudden, crushing headache. Like someone had hit me in the skull with a hammer. The pain was so intense I couldn't see straight. I called for Robert, but my voice came out weak and strange. The kitchen started spinning. The floor seemed to be tilting beneath my feet. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. The last thing I remember was Robert's voice calling my name from upstairs. Then everything went black. When I woke up, nothing was the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. I was in a hospital bed. White walls, white sheets, white ceiling. The smell of disinfectant and something else I couldn't identify. Machines were beeping softly nearby. A doctor was standing beside my bed. She was young with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was talking to someone, but I couldn't see who. Their voices sounded far away, like they were speaking underwater. I tried to sit up, but my head felt heavy and strange, like it was full of cotton. When I tried to speak, my throat was dry and scratchy. The words came out in a whisper. Where am I? What happened? The doctor turned to me with a gentle smile. She explained that I had suffered what she called a cerebrovascular event. Blood flow to part of my brain had been interrupted. I had been unconscious for 3 days. 3 days. That seemed impossible. It felt like I had just been making breakfast a few minutes ago. She asked me simple questions. What is your name? How old are you? What year is it? I could answer some of them. Margaret, 75. 2023. But when she asked about my family, something strange happened. The information was there, but it was foggy, like trying to see through thick glass. I knew I had a family, but the details were slipping away even as I tried to grasp them. That's when he walked into the room. The man I would believe was my husband for the next 6 months. He was tall and thin with graying hair. His eyes were red like he had been crying. He rushed to my bedside and took my hand in both of his. His touch was warm and familiar, though I couldn't remember why. Darling, you're awake. I was so scared I was going to lose you. I looked at his face. It seemed familiar but distant. Like seeing someone you knew a long time ago but couldn't quite place. I felt I should recognize him, but there was nothing there. Just emptiness where recognition should have been. The doctor explained that memory loss was common after my type of brain event. He said it might be temporary. That memories could return gradually over time. But she also said some memories might be gone forever. The man holding my hand squeezed gently. He told me not to worry. He said he would help me remember everything. He would take care of me. He would never leave my side. I felt grateful to this devoted stranger. Here was someone who clearly loved me deeply, even though I couldn't remember loving him back. The guilt was immediate and overwhelming. Who are you? I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. "I'm your husband," he said softly. "I'm David. We've been married for 28 years. David." The name felt strange in my mind, like trying on shoes that didn't quite fit. But he seemed so certain, so sincere. And the doctor was nodding like this made perfect sense. I accepted it. What choice did I have? When your memory is gone, you have to trust the people who claim to know you. You have to build your identity from the pieces others give you. I spent another week in the hospital. David never left my side. He slept in the uncomfortable chair next to my bed. He helped me eat when my hands shook. He read to me from magazines when I got bored. He was so patient, so loving. I kept waiting for some spark of recognition, some flood of returning memory. But there was nothing. Just this kind stranger who claimed to be the most important person in my life. When I was discharged from the hospital, David brought me to what he said was our home. It was a small ranch house on Maple Street. Everything about it felt foreign yet somehow familiar. He led me through each room like a tour guide. "This is our bedroom. This is where you like to read. This is your favorite chair." He spoke with such certainty that I never questioned him. The house was clean and tidy. There were photos on the mantel, but my brain couldn't process them properly. Faces that should have meant something but didn't. David explained that the doctors said visual memory might take longer to return. He had taken leave from his job to care for me full-time. Every morning he would help me get dressed. Not in an inappropriate way, but guiding me like I was a child who had forgotten how buttons worked. He was always respectful, always gentle. He made all my meals. Simple things he said I used to love. Chicken soup, grilled cheese sandwiches, cup of tea with honey. He would watch me eat with such concern, asking if I remembered the taste. I never did. The first few weeks were the hardest. I felt like a stranger in what was supposed to be my own life. David would tell me stories about our marriage. How we met at a church social. Our honeymoon at Niagara Falls. The house we bought together. None of it sparked any recognition. But his stories were detailed and consistent. He seemed to remember everything perfectly. He would get emotional talking about our early years. Sometimes he would even tear up. I felt terrible for him. Here was this loving husband whose wife couldn't remember their life together. He was grieving the loss of the woman I used to be. I wanted so desperately to be her again. To remember loving him. At night we slept in the same bed, but he always maintained proper distance. He said the doctors recommended taking physical intimacy slowly. That I needed time to adjust. He was so understanding about everything. He showed me photo albums. Pictures of us at various ages. Wedding photos, vacation snapshots, anniversary dinners. I studied every image hoping something would click. But they might as well have been pictures of strangers. David would point to each photo and provide context. "That was our trip to Colorado. That was your 50th birthday party. That was when we bought this house." His memories were so vivid and detailed. Sometimes I would catch him looking at me with such sadness. I thought it was because he missed the old me. The wife who remembered loving him. I felt guilty for causing him so much pain. He encouraged me to rest and not push too hard. He said the doctors told him that forcing memories could actually prevent them from returning naturally. So I waited patiently for my mind to heal itself. Visitors came occasionally. Neighbors who claimed to know me. They would hug me and ask how I was feeling. I would smile and nod, but their faces meant nothing. David would explain later who each person was and how they knew us. A few visitors seemed confused about something. They would start to say things then stop themselves. Look at David strangely. But he would quickly change the subject or suggest that I needed rest. I trusted him completely. When you lose your memory, the people around you become your entire reality. Their version of your life becomes your truth. You have no choice but to believe them. David was so devoted. He never lost patience with my questions. Never got frustrated when I couldn't remember something he had just told me. He was the perfect caregiver. The perfect husband. But looking back now, I can see the signs I missed. How he controlled who visited and when. How he always had explanations for things that didn't quite make sense. How he discouraged me from going out alone. He was isolating me. Keeping me dependent on his version of reality. And I was so grateful for his care that I never questioned it. The most painful part was feeling like I had lost myself completely. Without memories, who was I? I was just an empty shell being filled with someone else's stories about who I used to be. David would reassure me that I was still the same person inside. That memories didn't define who I was. But I felt like a fraud. like I was pretending to be someone I couldn't remember being. Late at night, when David was sleeping beside me, I would lie awake feeling lost and confused. Nothing felt right. Nothing felt like home. But I blamed the brain injury. I thought it was just part of the healing process. As weeks turned into months, my confusion only deepened. Instead of memories returning, I found myself questioning everything about the reality David had created for me. Little things didn't add up. He claimed I loved classical music, but when he played it, I felt no connection. He said I was an excellent cook, but when I tried to prepare meals, I felt completely lost in the kitchen. He told me I had been a quiet, shy person. But something inside me rebelled against that description. I felt like I had opinions and thoughts that wanted to come out. Like there was a more vibrant person trapped inside this confused shell. Sometimes I would find myself humming songs that David said I had never liked. Or craving foods he claimed I had always hated. When I mentioned these things, he would smile sadly and say the brain injury had changed some of my preferences. The house still felt foreign to me. I would walk through the rooms trying to find something that felt familiar. Some object that would trigger a memory. But everything felt staged. Like a museum display of someone else's life. I found a jewelry box on the dresser. Inside were pieces that David said were my favorites. But when I put them on, they felt wrong. Too heavy or too flashy for my taste. When I mentioned this, he said I was still adjusting to being myself again. The neighbors were kind but strange. They would visit and tell stories about things we had supposedly done together. But their stories didn't match what David had told me. When I asked him about the discrepancies, he said people's memories weren't always reliable. Mrs. Peterson from next door came by one afternoon while David was at the grocery store. She seemed surprised to find me alone. She started to say something about Robert, but then caught herself and looked confused. "Who is Robert?" I asked. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said she must have been thinking of someone else. But her expression was troubled as she left. When David returned, I told him about the visit. His jaw tightened, but he smiled and said Mrs. Peterson was getting forgetful in her old age. He suggested we limit visitors until I was stronger. I began having dreams. Not memories exactly, but fragments of scenes that felt more real than my waking life. An older man with gentle hands and kind eyes. A woman with my face but different clothes. A garden full of tomatoes. When I told David about the dreams, he looked worried. He said sometimes the brain created false memories during healing. That I shouldn't trust everything I dreamed or imagined. Only what he told me was real. But the dreams felt more authentic than anything in my supposed waking life. In the dreams I laughed more. I felt more alive. I seemed to know who I was without having to be told. I started feeling anxious and restless. David noticed and suggested I see a doctor about medication for depression. He said it was common for people with brain injuries to feel disconnected from their lives. The doctor prescribed pills that made me feel foggy and sleepy. David was very careful about making sure I took them every day. He said they would help my brain heal faster. But the medication made everything worse. The dreams became fainter. My questions seemed less important. I became more passive and accepting of David's explanations for everything. Still, doubt nagged at me. When David wasn't around, I would search the house for clues about who I really was. I found a wedding album, but the photos looked strange. The bride looked like me but younger. The groom looked like David, but the wedding seemed too recent for a 28-year marriage. I found clothes in the closet that didn't seem like my style. Too young and too small. David said I had lost weight during my illness and my taste had changed. But nothing felt right. In quiet moments, I would catch glimpses of someone else's life bleeding through. A different house with different furniture. A man with gray hair and calloused hands. A daughter who lived far away. But every time I tried to hold on to these glimpses, they would slip away like water through my fingers. David's reality would reassert itself, stronger and more detailed than my fragmentary doubts. The isolation was the worst part. David said I wasn't ready for too much social interaction. That it might overwhelm my healing brain. So it was just the two of us, day after day, in this house that never felt like home. I began to feel like a prisoner in my own life. But I was a grateful prisoner because my jailer was so kind and caring. The confusion was maddening, but I had no choice but to accept it. Looking back, I can see how expertly David manipulated every aspect of my reality. How he used my vulnerability and gratitude to keep me trapped in his fabricated world. But at the time I trusted him completely. The truth was out there waiting to destroy the careful lie he had built. But for months I lived in his version of my life, never knowing how deep the deception went. The truth came out on a rainy Thursday in September. 6 months after I woke up in that hospital bed believing David was my husband. 6 months of living a lie so profound it still makes me dizzy to think about it. It started with a phone call. David had gone to the hardware store to buy light bulbs. I was alone in the house, which was rare. He usually took me with him everywhere or arranged for someone to stay with me. The phone rang while I was trying to read a book that felt familiar but foreign at the same time. I almost didn't answer because David always handled the calls. But something made me pick up. "Hello, Margaret. This is Dr. Williams from the hospital." I remembered her. The kind doctor with wire-rimmed glasses who had treated me after my brain injury. "I wanted to check on your recovery. How are you adjusting to being back home with David?" Something in her voice seemed odd, like she was fishing for information. I told her I was doing well, that David was taking excellent care of me. There was a long pause. Then she said something that changed everything. "Margaret, I need to ask you something important. Do you remember anything about your husband Robert? Or your daughter Sarah?" The words hit me like lightning. Robert, Sarah. Names that felt more real than anything in my current life. Names that made my heart race with recognition I couldn't explain. "I don't understand," I whispered. "David is my husband." Another long pause. Then Dr. Williams' voice became very gentle but very serious. "Margaret, David is your son. Robert was your husband of 47 years. He died from a heart attack 3 days after you were admitted to the hospital. Sarah's your daughter. She lives in California." The phone slipped from my hand. The room started spinning just like it had the morning of my brain injury. But this time, instead of everything going black, everything was suddenly, brilliantly, terrifyingly clear. Robert. My Robert. Dead while I was unconscious. Dead while I forgot he ever existed. Sarah. My daughter. The little girl with blonde curls who grew up to be a teacher in Los Angeles. David. My son. My sensitive, devoted son who had lost both parents in the same week and couldn't bear to let me go too. The memories came flooding back like a dam had burst. Our wedding day. David's birth. Sarah's first steps. 47 years of love and laughter and ordinary moments that were more precious than gold. Robert's heart attack in the hospital parking lot. He had been coming to see me every day. The stress of my condition had been too much for his 74-year-old heart. David finding his father collapsed in the parking lot. Watching him die while I lay unconscious upstairs, unaware that half my world had just ended. I remembered everything now. The real everything, not the fabricated life David had created to keep me with him. When David returned from the hardware store, he found me sitting on the couch, staring at nothing. The phone was still on the floor where I had dropped it. He knew immediately that I knew. The careful mask he had worn for 6 months slipped away, and I saw the truth in his face. The desperation. The grief. The terrible loneliness that had driven him to this deception. We stared at each other in silence for what felt like hours. Finally he spoke. "I couldn't lose you too, Mom. I couldn't lose both of you." His voice broke on the last word. This grown man, my 52-year-old son, crumbled before my eyes. The weight of what he had done, what he had taken from both of us, crashed down on him all at once. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to scream and rage at him for stealing 6 months of my life. For letting me live a lie while I should have been mourning my husband. For making me complicit in something so wrong. But all I could feel was devastation. Not just at his betrayal but at the realization of what I had lost. Robert was gone. Had been gone for 6 months. I would never see his face again. Never hold his hand. Never tell him goodbye. The grief hit me like a physical blow. 6 months of delayed mourning came crashing down in one terrible moment. I doubled over with the pain of it, sobbing for the husband I couldn't remember losing. David tried to approach me but I held up my hand to stop him. I couldn't bear to be touched by the person who had stolen my right to grieve. Who had stolen my right to be myself. The house that had never felt like home suddenly felt like a prison. Everything in it was a lie. Every moment of the past 6 months had been built on deception. I looked at this man who was my son but had pretended to be my husband. This person I had trusted completely who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible. The days that followed were the darkest of my life. Darker even than losing my memory because at least then I had been blissfully unaware of what I had lost. Now I knew everything. Robert was gone. Had been gone for 6 months while I played house with our son. I had missed his funeral. Missed saying goodbye. Missed the entire process of mourning the love of my life. Sarah came immediately when Dr. Williams called her. She flew in from California and found me in a state of complete emotional collapse. I couldn't stop crying. Couldn't eat. Couldn't function. She held me while I sobbed for the father she had already mourned. While I raged at the months I had lost. While I tried to process the magnitude of what David had done to both of us. Sarah was devastated too, but for different reasons. She had buried her father alone while her mother forgot he existed. She had grieved for both parents while David played the sick game of house. David wouldn't come near the house while Sarah was there. He was staying at a motel across town, drowning in his own guilt and shame. Sarah wanted to press charges. She said what he had done was a form of psychological abuse. But I couldn't bring myself to destroy him completely. He was still my son. Still the sensitive little boy who used to bring me aspirin when I had headaches. His crime came from love, even if it was a twisted, selfish love. Sarah didn't understand my reluctance to punish him. She was furious at both David and me. Furious that I would even consider forgiving something so unforgivable. But she hadn't lived through those 6 months. She hadn't experienced the kindness and devotion he had shown, even while deceiving me. She hadn't seen the grief and loneliness that had driven him to such desperate measures. I'm not excusing what he did. There is no excuse for stealing someone's reality. For letting them live a lie while they should have been facing the truth, no matter how painful. But I understood the desperation that had led him there. The crushing loss of his father. The terror of losing his mother too. The loneliness of being suddenly alone in the world at 52 years old. He had been selfish and cruel and deeply, deeply wrong. But he had also been broken. And broken people sometimes make choices that hurt everyone around them. The worst part was reconciling my memories of those 6 months. I had felt grateful to this man I thought was my husband. I had tried to be a good wife to him. I had felt affection and appreciation for his care. Now I knew that every moment of that gratitude had been based on a lie. Every attempt to remember loving him had been doomed from the start because I had never been his wife. I was his mother who had forgotten herself. The confusion I had felt, the sense that nothing was quite right, now made perfect sense. My instincts had been trying to tell me the truth even when my damaged brain couldn't access it. Sarah wanted me to come live with her in California. Start over completely away from all the painful memories. But this town was where I had lived my real life with Robert. Where we had raised our children and built our home. I couldn't run away from the pain. I had to face it and work through it if I was ever going to heal from this double trauma. After 2 weeks, Sarah had to return to her job and her own family. Before she left, she made me promise to get professional help. To see a therapist who specialized in trauma and grief. I agreed because I knew I couldn't process this alone. The layers of deception and loss were too complex for me to untangle without guidance. David sent a letter apologizing and begging for forgiveness. He said he would do anything to make it right, but he knew nothing could undo what he had done. He said he would leave town if I wanted. Give me space to heal. I wasn't ready to see him yet. Might never be ready. But I also wasn't ready to cut him out of my life forever. He was all the family I had left now that Sarah lived so far away. It has been 8 months since I learned the truth. 8 months of therapy and grief work and slowly rebuilding my sense of self. I am a different person now than I was before any of this happened. The Margaret who woke up in that hospital bed was innocent in her confusion. The Margaret who lived for 6 months as David's pretend wife was a victim of circumstances beyond her control. But the Margaret I am now has had to integrate all of these experiences into one coherent identity. I have learned things about myself I never knew before. I am stronger than I thought. More resilient. More capable of forgiveness than I ever imagined possible. I have also learned about the fragility of everything we take for granted. Memory, identity, trust, family bonds. All of it can be shattered in an instant and rebuilt in ways we never expected. Robert is still gone. Nothing will ever change that. I have had to mourn him twice. Once for the death I didn't remember and once for all the time I lost being unable to grieve properly. But I have also found unexpected grace in my memories of him. When they came flooding back, they were so vivid and complete. Every moment of our 47 years together preserved perfectly despite the trauma my brain had endured. I remember our first kiss on the front porch of my parents' house. I remember the way he cried when David was born. I remember him teaching Sarah to ride a bicycle in our driveway. I remember growing old together, gray hair and wrinkled hands but hearts still young with love. Those memories are my treasure now. More precious because I know how easily they could have been lost forever. David and I have begun the slow process of rebuilding our relationship. It will never be what it was before. Trust, once broken so completely, can never be fully restored. But we are finding a new way to be mother and son. He's getting help too. Therapy to deal with his grief and the shame of what he did. We see each other once a month now, in public places with neutral ground between us. I understand now that his deception came from a place of desperate love. He couldn't bear to lose both parents in the same week. So he created a fantasy where he could keep one of them even if it meant living a lie. It doesn't excuse what he did. Nothing ever could. But understanding the why has helped me find a path toward forgiveness, even if I can never forget. Sarah visits more often now. We have grown closer through this shared trauma. She is helping me sort through Robert's belongings and create a memorial space in my home where I can remember him properly. I have learned that healing is not about forgetting or moving on. It's about integrating all of your experiences, even the painful ones, into a life that has meaning and purpose. My memory of those 6 months of deception will always be with me. But so will my memory of 47 years of real love. And so will my knowledge that even in the depths of confusion and loss, the human capacity for resilience is extraordinary. I am 75 years old. I have lived through things that would have destroyed me at 30 or 40. But I am still here. Still breathing. Still capable of love and hope and even joy. If you are facing something that seems impossible to survive, remember this. You are stronger than you know. You can endure more than you think. And sometimes the most broken places in our lives become the sources of our greatest wisdom. That is my gift to you from this terrible, beautiful, complicated journey. That is what I want you to remember long after you have forgotten my name. We are all more resilient than we know. And love, even imperfect love, even love that makes terrible mistakes, is still the force that holds our world together. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for allowing an old woman to unburden her heart. May you find strength in your own struggles, and may you never forget how precious and fragile this life really is.